Imagine this. A new government agency led by Elon Musk claims it's here to slash waste, fraud, and abuse. It exists to protect your tax dollars. Sounds great, until it demands unrestricted access to your most sensitive data, social security numbers, medical records, bank info, everything. They're calling it innovation and efficiency. But let's be honest, this smells less like efficiency and more like surveillance on steroids. Lisa Rubin of MSNBC reports on Trump's request to the U.S. Supreme Court to grant the Department of Government Efficiency, an agency created by Elon Musk, the ability to access your personal Social Security data.
Can access key Social Security data. MSNBC's Lisa Rubin is following this story for us. What more have we learned from this morning's hearing in this case?
Well, Chris, there was a preliminary injunction hearing this morning in front of Judge Ellen Hollander in Baltimore, Maryland. She is the judge that previously had granted a temporary restraining order with respect to DOJ's use of Social Security Administration data. But in comes the New York Times with reporting that DOJ and the Social Security Administration may be reclassifying whether someone is alive or dead in order to encourage immigrants to self-deport. And while Judge Hollander said yesterday that she would not expand the scope of today's hearing to talk about whether or not DOJ was in fact in compliance with her order, she would consider that information and whether or not to grant a preliminary injunction. One of the things that the plaintiffs have presented in connection with this morning's preliminary injunction hearing is a declaration from a 30-year employee of the Social Security Administration who says that if, in fact, they do have access to this master death file data and can reclassify whether someone is alive or dead, that would cut off a panoply of benefits as well as access to financial things like checking accounts, credit cards. Whether or not Judge Hollander is going to grant a preliminary injunction, we still don't know, and I will be eagerly awaiting that, as I know you will be, Chris.
I will indeed.
Now, the Trump administration has been adamant that this access is essential to ferret out waste and abuse. Solicitor General John Sauer even went so far as to argue in court that time-sensitive efforts to modernize government systems are being derailed by district court rulings. Judge Ellen Hollander, however, described their approach as, and I quote, a fishing expedition, a strong critique. So what's the real story here? On one hand, the administration claims that it's after fraud reduction. Efforts like verifying whether Social Security recipients are even alive through projects like the so-called Are You Alive initiative. But here's the kicker. Multiple judges, not just one, have pointed out that many of the Department of Government efficiency goals could be achieved with anonymized or redacted data. You see, the courts are asking whether the Department of Government efficiency actually needs all this intensely personal information, or if there's an ulterior agenda driving this push. And let's talk about the elephant in the room, executive overreach. When a judge blocks an agency's access to data, we might be quick to frame it as an obstruction to efficiency. But if this injunction is a legal check on sweeping executive power, as critics argue, should we not be asking who ultimately benefits from the Department of Government efficiency methods? Is this really about governmental efficiency, or could it also be about amassing more control at the expense of Americans' privacy? Elon Musk, of course, frames the Social Security Administration as a Ponzi scheme and insists that it's riddled with inefficiencies. He's a bold thinker, sure, but his statements also spark a broader question. If you could access records for millions of Americans under the guise of modernization and fraud reduction, wouldn't you inadvertently or intentionally gain leverage or power beyond just cutting waste? That's where the conversation really gets sticky. These judicial battles reveal more than just technical disagreements over data security. They expose a fundamental clash about how much power we should entrust to the executive branch and its appointees like Musk. And well, it brings us to the heart of this tension. How much are we willing to risk or sacrifice in the name of efficiency and progress? I mean, when we dig into these criticisms, legal experts slamming the Department of Government efficiency for relying on suspicion rather than evidence, and union lawsuits challenging this initiative under the Privacy Act, it's hard not to ask, are we looking at modernization or something else entirely? Now, let's shift our focus to the wave of opposition the Department of Government Efficiency is facing, because, make no mistake, it's not just judges scrutinizing their actions. Unions, advocacy groups, retirees, these are the voices calling out what they see as clear violations of the Privacy Act. We are talking lawsuits that argue the Department of Government Efficiency moves are chilling, even dangerous. Seriously, how confident would you feel giving over sensitive details like your medical history or bank info if you thought it could end up in the wrong hands? And here's where it gets even more twisted. Reports show the Department of Government Efficiency has been working with big data firms like Palantir, companies with a controversial past when it comes to respecting privacy. Critics describe their approach as fishing expeditions, which makes me wonder, are they even using this data in ways that truly benefit the public? Or is this just an excuse to hoard incredibly powerful, sensitive information? Speaking of sensitive data, let me, as a healthcare professional, paint you a picture. Imagine a system where medical records, years of deeply personal information, are thrown into these projects. Maybe it's to detect fraud, sure, but what about the fallout? The trust between a patient and their healthcare provider could unravel almost instantly if people know their records might be rifled through by, well, anyone Musk team decides needs access. And why? Just to claim they've modernized information processing? It's invasive at best, unethical at worst. And the more I think about it, it's not just individual privacy at risk here, is it? It's the collective trust we place in the systems meant to protect us. If this becomes the new normal, where governmental efficiency trumps personal privacy, how do we ensure these lines aren't crossed again and again? That question keeps me up at night. Let's talk about the delicate balance between executive authority and civil rights. Because right now, that balance is looking pretty skewed. Judge Richardson, one of the dissenting voices, framed it like this. When you grant unrestricted access to all this highly personal data, social security numbers, bank records, even medical histories, it's hard not to see it as a direct affront to the basic privacy protections we're supposed to rely on. And honestly, I can't argue with that. The stakes feel immense. Take this as one example. Numerous stories have surfaced about people wrongly stripped of their benefits due to errors in data handling, mistakes labeling them, quite literally, as deceased in the system. Can you even imagine that? Losing not just your retirement income, but your very ability to function in the modern world. No banking, no health care, no valid ID, all because someone, somewhere, decided efficiency was worth more than accuracy. These aren't statistics. They are real people whose lives are upended in the name of progress. And here's the bigger picture. It's not just about missteps or inefficiencies. It's about the precedent being set. When you see an effort like the Department of Government Efficiency openly pushing the boundaries of what's legally acceptable, you start to realize how precarious our democratic principles truly are. Executive overreach doesn't just happen. It thrives in complacency, in moments where we're too willing to exchange freedom for the promise of streamlined governance. And once that line is crossed, it's rarely just a one-time thing. But here's something that really sticks with me. The rhetoric behind this initiative is dressed up as progress, as modernization. But if modernization means undermining trust in government protections, is it really worth it? We are talking about systems that took decades to build, systems entrusted with some of the most sensitive details of our lives. If those protections crumble now, who's holding the Department of Government Efficiency accountable? Who's holding any of us accountable? So, let's not sugarcoat it. What we're seeing is more than just growing pains in government policy. It's a test of how seriously we take the principles we claim to uphold. Privacy, dignity, transparency, these are not optional traits of a functioning democracy. They are bedrocks. And if they feel like they are eroding, it's because, well, they probably are. And honestly, the question we need to ask ourselves is, are we creating systems that foster trust, or are we building systems designed to erode it? Judge Hollander called the Department of Government efficiency efforts a fishing expedition. But maybe it's more fitting to ask whether this is actually a fishing expedition or a power grab dressed in regulatory jargon. Something about this entire debate feels, well, unsettlingly familiar, does it not? And that brings us to the end of today's episode of The Real 411. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to explore this vital issue with me. You know, every time we dig into topics like this, privacy, democracy, executive power, it's a reminder of just how interconnected we all are. What happens to one of us really, deeply matters to all of us. So here's what I'd love for you to do. If you found today's conversation insightful or even fired you up just a little, please share this episode. Drop a comment on our socials, follow us, and let us know the issues you want me to dive into next. Your voice shapes this show. It really, truly does. And I have to say, if you value independent media, if digging deeper and asking the hard questions resonates with you, consider supporting us on Substack or Spotify. Subscribing, whether it's free or paid, helps keep this platform alive so we can continue these tough, necessary conversations. Together, we can ensure the stories that really matter don't go untold. Because remember, the headlines might grab our attention, but they're never the whole story. And we all deserve to know the bigger picture, to understand how today's policies shape tomorrow's world. So, until next time, stay informed, stay bold, and more than anything, stay real.